Hi there. Welcome to today's episode. I've got Cauvin joining me. It's coming up after the headlines. Had our Hangout on Monday night. There was over 70 people there, and I just want to say thank you, first and foremost. Buy John Carroll's new album, Can't Afford Not To. That's the name of the album. Go to johncarroll.org right now and buy it. John was there. We talked a little bit about it. We'll talk more about it, and I'll share that conversation right here on the show. And I just wanted to say it was pretty clear at the Monday Hangout that we needed each other, that people are scared about what is happening and what is coming. The uncertainty is almost too much to bear, and I want to let you know I'll be right here with you along the way, trying to figure it out, connecting and building our community as much as we can so that we have better ways of understanding, that we have ways to support each other, and that we don't get lost in this crazy upside down world and think that we are losing our minds, because that's part of the strategy here, apparently, is to make you think that you're crazy. You're not. You're not. And I am here with you, and I am here with all of our great guests and friends to explain it, which is exactly what JL does today. And I will try to do it with you every day. So thank you very much to everybody who came to the Hangout. Thank you to everybody who supports the show. I hope to see you in Las Vegas at PODJAM. That is my opening message to you here on March 4th, 2025. I'm very happy to have you. And so let's get to the headlines from yesterday. And I just want to warn you, they're not great. They're scary. But let's start with the fact that the bad man announced yesterday that the tariffs are happening, 25%. On imports from Mexico and Canada, supposed to start today, sparked renewed fears of a North American trade war that already showed signs of pushing up inflation and hindering growth. And the more that the president spoke yesterday, the more markets slid. Ooh, it was a bad day. Stock market saw heavy selling Monday afternoon following comments from President Trump indicating previously threatened trade duties were set to be imposed. The Dow Jones dropped about 800 points. The S&P fell 500. It was set for the worst day of the year, which is pretty shocking. This was a crazy story yesterday. An official at the Federal Foreign Aid Agency, USAID, that the Trump administration targeted with layoffs, cuts, and funding obstacles, was placed on leave on Sunday after saying that those moves would lead to, quote, preventable death and threats to U.S. security. In a memo to his staff, including those placed on leave or laid off, a guy named Nick Enrich said that the U.S. Agency for International Development has not implemented life-saving humanitarian assistance under a temporary waiver to pause on foreign aid issued by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So apparently he told some inconvenient truths, and he was fired by the Trump administration yesterday. So that's only going to put more of fear into those that are still there to tell the truth. But that guy's a hero for doing what he did. And I'm sure we're not going to hear the end, or we're going to hear more from this guy, Nick Enrich. Yesterday, also a federal judge in Washington blocked the president from ousting the leader of the federal watchdog agency, saying that effort to remove the official without due cause had violated the law. So in an order over the weekend, Judge Amy Berman Jackson granted a permanent injunction against the government, allowing this guy named Hampton Dellinger to remain the head of the Office of Special Counsel, which protects federal whistleblowers. So that's good news, at least for the moment. The head of the Pentagon's sprawling healthcare system resigned yesterday. Army Lieutenant General Talita Crossland resigned abruptly Friday, a week after the Trump administration purged several military officers, including the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. She had overseen the Defense Health Agency. She's been replaced, according to a statement issued by the acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs. So that is going to be a huge issue as well. And we're hearing more about U.S. policy toward Mexico, defense policy, if you will. That's in quotes. The first call, apparently, that the U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who was a TV host just weeks before that, had with Mexico's top military officials, apparently it didn't go well. Yeah, that's right. Hegseth told the officials that if Mexico didn't deal with the collusion between the country's government and drug cartels, the U.S. military was prepared to take unilateral action, according to people briefed on the call, which took place at the end of January. Mexico's top military brass who were on that call were shocked and angered, feeling that he was suggesting U.S. military action inside Mexico. And they do have those troops on the border. We'll see what happens there. That could be a disaster. Well, anything Hegseth is involved with, so that's bad news. And a very scary prospect from CNN with the exclusive. Apparently, foreign adversaries, including Russia and China, have recently directed their intelligence services to ramp up recruiting of U.S. federal employees working in national security, targeting those who have been fired or feel they could be soon, according to 4 people familiar with U.S. intelligence and a document reviewed by CNN. So that's right. China and Russia are recruiting federal employees who are disgruntled to help exploit our weaknesses, etc. You know, what spies do. Let's go to the Middle East, where the first phase of the Gaza ceasefire has ended. Israel and Hamas are continuing negotiations, but also preparing for a possible return to war. In Germany, a man drove a car into a lunch crowd, killing at least 2 people. The driver has been arrested. That's horrific. The man accused of killing 7 people during a 4th of July parade in Chicago suburb in 2022 has pled guilty. The Vatican says Pope Francis, who's now 88 years old, had 2 acute respiratory crises in the hospital. So some days are good, others are very bad for the Pope. The world's largest chip maker announced it planned to spend $100 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years to expand production. So I guess that's good. TSMC is the name of that company. And the 10-year Treasury yield has a lot of investors concerned. Increasingly glooming sentiment about growth in America is driving down an otherwise pretty safe investment. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has a suggestion to curb the growth of an invasive species called the nutria. It's called. It's like that giant beaver. It looks like a giant rat. It's an invasive species. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service said yesterday Americans should hunt and cook nutrias. So there you go. That's the Trump administration, U.S. Fish and Wildlife is suggesting this is how we're going to curb a growing population of these invasive species that bear a resemblance to a very large rat. Eat them. Thanks, guys. Those are your headlines for today. That's what I gathered for you. Like I said, pretty scary, depressing stuff. And I'm sorry I don't have more to share here in the headlines. That's somehow better. But this is the world that we're currently living in. And you can find me following all these stories in different ways and getting on the best guests to explain them every day here on Stand Up. And normally every day I've got your clips for you, but not today. Long story, don't have the clips. We'll get back to them tomorrow, other than one big clip from J.L. Cauvin coming up. But that is your news, and clips will return tomorrow. Sorry about that. But I do have this from J.L. Cauvin. This is a 7-minute video that he made on YouTube of his commentary. Of course, he's always doing comedy, but he also does great commentary, both. And I just thought this was so good that I wanted to share it, all 7 minutes of it, his analysis of, well, all of what happened in the Oval Office on Friday with Zelensky and Trump and J.D. Vance, etc. And then we jump into the conversation after that. But here is a 7-minute. You can find this at YouTube. You should go subscribe to JL's YouTube right now. He's going to join us, of course, at PODJAM. You should see him live. And let's kick it off right now with this amazing piece of commentary that he posted just a couple days ago.
J.D. Vance has made me reconsider. Here I am in my hotel in Charlotte. And I just did 2 hours ago a video on Zelensky and Trump, a little funny video. Go check it out. But then I saw the actual video of the meeting and just a few things because I know what's going to happen. I've seen enough Fox News. I check in on it every so often just out of morbid curiosity. But I know they're just going to echo whatever Trump and Vance said, as egregious and awful as it was today. But before I get to Trump and the MAGA movement in general, J.D. Vance has made me reconsider something, and that's I owe Mike Pence a huge apology. Not only did January 6th prove that Mike Pence, although that didn't seem like the most significant thing ever, he did have more of a spine than 95% of the GOP, and I made fun of him relentlessly during the first Trump term. And boy, oh boy, would we be in a much better position with Mike Pence as president or vice president than the two we have today. And for J.D. Vance, who is impressing me with how big a sycophant and piece of shit he clearly is, but reprimanding Zelensky to say thank you like he's scolding one of his kids is, I don't want to call it a low point in American history, but it's because it's not big enough of a deal, but it's pretty low. And what they're going to do on Fox now is say, the Jesse Waters and the Sean Hannitys of the world, did he say thank you? How about some diplomacy from Zelensky? How about we gave you so much money? Granted, it's only a third of what Trump claims we gave you. No, they're not going to obviously fact check the numbers. But they're going to speak, and this is the gift of the Republican Party in understanding the American people. Diplomacy is not scolding an ally to say thank you and to kiss the ass of the president. But that sounds sensible to probably a lot of this country. So they'll go, yeah, just say thank you. Just show some gratitude, bro. I don't know. His country's in the middle of a violent war, and he's coming to an ally for help. And and the thing is, he's trying to kiss ass. But Donald Trump doesn't want the ass kissing you're comfortable giving. He only feels comfortable when he knows you're no longer comfortable, when he feels the moral or emotional sacrifice. That's how you know he's a sick fuck. That's why he has to lie on things. He would lie about his net worth. I once said this during his first term, but if Trump won the Powerball for $1 billion, he's not able to just be happy and go, wow, $1 billion, that's great. He needs to feel like he got over on somebody, like they lost or he tricked them. So he would say, I won the Powerball, $2 billion. How about $2 billion? Nobody's ever won that much. Because just winning $1 billion wouldn't be good enough. He'd have to make someone else feel like a sucker or feel like, ooh, I got away with that. That is the way he governs. So Zelensky can kiss ass to a level that he's comfortable with as a man and a leader. But Trump needs to see you sweat and see you weak so he can feel strong. And so even to allies, that's why he keeps beating up on allies. Now, to say nothing of the fact that he freed the Tate brothers, but is probably going to gleefully usher Zelensky and Ukraine into destruction and possibly death. Why don't the MAGA men who are always talking about the values and real men, isn't stand up for your friends like a man value? Isn't don't go back on your word? Isn't don't be a petty little spiteful bitch? Like all these guys, the MAGA movement, the masculinity, once again, he is like the real house bitch of DC, Donald Trump. He is cattier and wears more makeup than all of those reality shows put together, and yet they keep telling themselves this is the paragon of masculinity. He does nothing that resembles any of our, remember John Wayne, remember all when men were men? Nothing Trump does is a value associated with when men were men. He's a bitch. He's a liar. He's petty. He whines. He wears makeup. He's built like a melting cup of pudding. And yet, just, I guess, to make liberals mad and to show off some sort of faux performative strength, he's a man's man. So I feel bad for Zelensky. What happened in the White House was a fucking disgrace. And nothing's and I forget Elon Musk is also the other branch of manhood. The guy looks and is built like a fucking albino bullfrog. But Fox isn't going to report this. Fox is none of those. They're not, because they have no limit now. They realize their power is tied to Trump and supporting Trump, and they won't stand up. They won't even question any of this shit. But it's a disgrace. It is an absolute disgrace. And I've been making jokes on Twitter where it's like, think of all our great world leaders through and the great speeches we've heard. And Trump is just basically a petty bitch extortionist. And he extorts our friends because he knows they need our friendship, so he abuses it. And he doesn't do shit to anybody who's an enemy or anybody who represents a real threat. And for all those guys, like, a real man stands up to bullies, a real man defends his family, a real man keeps his word. Donald Trump is the equivalent of he'd be in a school, and instead of punching the bully, he'd go to the table of special needs kids and throw food at them. I don't know how this guy can represent, not only is he an awful president, he's just a clearly, plainly awful human being, and doesn't represent any of that old school values and when men were men bullshit that the right always spews. I don't know. I feel bad for Ukraine, though.
Yeah, don't we all? Well, most of us do. Maybe not most of us. That's the problem. That is J.L. Cauvin talking about J.D. Vance. Look at that, what they've got in common. Those initials, huh? I think he's got to explain himself. All right, and now here is my conversation with J.L. yesterday. I think you're going to love it, and I hope you do. He crystallizes a lot of things. I love to book the guests here on a regular basis that help us understand exactly what's happening and help us analyze and frame things, help us synthesize these people, these ideas, their incentives, and so on. And J.L. Cauvin is one of the best at that. He's one of my favorite comedians and commentators. You should go support all of his work on Patreon and buy a CAmeo and buy his comedy specials and watch them and stream them and all of the rest. And let's do it right now with J.L. Cauvin, who's my very special guest today. J.L. Cauvin joins me now. I just played that 7-minute post on YouTube, and I just want to say in preparation of today's conversation with you, I watched most and seen most of your latest posts, and I only want to tell you, in this chaotic world that we're in, we need exactly what you continue to give us, which is both entertainment and analysis at the same time. Very few people do it better. I'm such a huge fan. I know you hate the state of the world as much as I do, if not worse, but I am so here for what you're doing. You've been such a good friend. I'm excited to see you in Vegas, but I just want to tell you, just because I'm jumping out of it, a big old compliment to you for the amazing work that you're continuing to do in this descent into chaos.
Thank you. And when I saw several people complimenting Mike Myers' Elon Musk impression, I literally just went and refined my own impression to make it unassailable, and then got a lot of views for my most recent Elon Musk impression.
How big of a hit is it for you? Because
it's like 25,000 on YouTube so far, but it was like it was a little bit of a Michael Jordan spite move of, oh, you think his is good? Watch this.
Oh, I saw that play out, because that also came out in one of your moments of weakness Facebook posts where you lower yourself to criticizing somebody else's impression, and yet you're never wrong about it. The truth is what you said is right. It was a shit impression, but as I pushed back, I don't know if I texted you or said it publicly. No one thinks it was a good impression, but it really made a mockery of Elon Musk. The way he would stop and freeze and glitch, all that stuff was Mike Myers-esque, and we liked the idea that he gave the Mike Myers treatment. And the Canadian.
If I can have one more moment of incredible pettiness before I talk about what a real man is and should do, allow me to be Trump, because for me, I'm very sensitive to the difference between I can find lots of things funny. Like, I don't begrudge anybody finding Mike Myers funny doing Elon Musk. Yeah. But I have had myself shortchanged so often in the impression world that when somebody goes, oh, this was a great impression, I'm like, could you be more clear there? Did you think it was funny, or do you think it was a good impression? Because if you think it's a good impression, then I need to quit comedy, because clearly being accurate or fine-tuning things is not as important. That's the only reason I said something, because I get way too many people conflating I found it funny and I found it good, like accurate.
Everybody that does not think about comedy other than what makes them laugh, from stupid videos of children flying into the ceiling to a brilliant bit done by you, thinks when they hear your description of it, at least on my show, this is my audience currently, obviously there's an audience for your complaints, but they're thinking, you're overthinking this. And I'm here for it. But I think I can hear like a lot of like people in my eyes going, I think he's overthinking it. Just do what you do, which is so damn funny. And that's what you do. All right. Enough of the pettiness and accurate criticism. I will give you that. You really could be successful if there were ever such a thing. And I guess you can monetize it now. Theater critics and film critics. You read books, you watch films, you go to Broadway shows, and then you share those critiques as part of your content, especially bonus content for your subscribers. You're very good at it.
To reach out to right-wing America, I'm thinking of also becoming a porn critic, to start to really break down the nuances, just to not leave anybody out, because some of the entertainment I consume is very elitist. I figure why not also reach out to broader...
Is that a thing? I have seen that there's like podcasts where porn stars come on and then begin
that's literally clickbait content for, hey, look, it's a busty woman talking about what kind of sex she likes. And I'm so tired of algorithms seeing me like, hey, yes, you put a huge pair of breasts in my feed. Yes, I watched for an extra 3 seconds because the last thing I was watching was like a news clip. And then all of a sudden, whoa, hey, yeah. And then TikTok or Instagram is just like, clearly you're obsessed with porn, so your next 80 reels will be like
let's just get that out. Let's get that out in the open. I'm glad that you just liberated that truth, because a couple nights ago I went on Instagram and I was 20 minutes going through the settings trying to clear out what it was sending me, because it was only sending me attractive women, because I do what every other guy does and clicks on an attractive person. I click on attractive men too, if I'm being honest. But it was just all women in my whole feed. And I don't want this. This isn't what I want. It's not healthy for me. I don't want to get caught up on it. And I could find no way to clear it. And then I went over to Facebook, which is the same company, and the Stand Up with Pete Dominic account has 9,000 followers, and I don't really use it like I do my personal Facebook account. But the point is, that account has crazy shit being sent to it in its timeline. Wow. I don't even use it, but there was a video of a woman breastfeeding a baby, which must be a thing. And so it's real upsetting.
Cookie was upset by the breastfeeding content. She barked as you said breastfeeding.
But the point is, I bring that up to talk about, so other people listening know that's a thing and don't feel horrible about it. But if there's a way to get rid of it, I also bring it up so a listener might tell me, because I don't want my feeds full of women in scantily clad clothes doing anything at all. I don't want that. I want men building tiny houses, mostly in Vermont.
Great. Yeah, I think it's obviously there is something eye-catching about an incredibly attractive woman.
Always.
But there should be a difference in these algorithms between, yes, it caught the eye of the average heterosexual male, but it doesn't mean I watched 10 minutes. Whereas if you put plane crashes or train wrecks on TikTok, you'd think of course I'm going to go, wait, what? What was it? Then what? Am I a train wreck enthusiast? Because then you're going to just show me nothing but train wrecks because I had a kind of visceral response to it. Now, have I watched for longer than 3 seconds on several of these women? Yes. Is this probably still just my fault? Yes.
I have found myself watching attractive women doing things for more than a few minutes, and it's such an unbelievable waste of time. I feel guilt about it. I don't like it. It brings me really nothing but whatever is happening in my dumb animal brain. But by the way, it starts also feeding me other things. Like I'm sure a lot of people, planes landing or cockpit videos. I like them. I don't know anything about aviation. I end up watching some of those. And what does that lead me to? Women pilots, attractive female pilots now landing. I'm like, it always brings you to that to try to keep you watching, and it's very effective, I think.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's been a lot of scholarly research written on this and these documentaries all about it. So we're just rehashing it, but I guess reminding folks out there, don't let your brain and your feeds get caught up that way. And those of you that aren't on social media at all, good for you. We've got to do it for our work, obviously, activism, and to fight the woke. So I got to ask you about your video that we just listened to and your reaction, anything that you would add to that given the weekend and commentary, some of the reactions that you predicted from right-wing media.
Right.
Yeah, about this.
And that doesn't make me a genius. There are certain things where you go, they cannot and will not push back on him now. It is, I've said before, and I don't think I said it in that video, I think I said it in a previous one, the constitutional crisis to me was the Senate not convicting him in 2021.
It's a really interesting
From
way
then on in, because that is the GOP, the Senate gets longer terms. I think I've said this before on your show, but I think it bears repeating. The Senate gets longer terms than the House or the president because the founders envisioned them as having cooler heads and like a longer term vision for the health of that's why they represent states, not just districts, because they're supposed to look at the health and the broader trends for the country, not just an election. But since McConnell, really, you've gotten a Senate that operates on a 2-year basis because it's all about swings of power, whereas the senators are not supposed to be that collective, worried about elections every 2-year body. And when you have that mindset, you don't do what's right. For instance, like convicting Donald Trump when he was dead to rights. And when that happened, when they let him off the hook, that was the constitutional remedy to hold a president accountable. When they didn't do that, to me, was we were living, I think I called it in one of my videos, a dormant constitutional crisis. Like we were in a state of, it's not being tested, but we let a guilty man off. We let a guilty man walk free to survive politically. And now we're in exactly what was predicted with Trump. Now, with the video, in terms of the masculinity question,
the Oval Office disaster
with Zelensky,
and commentary is what you're referring to as the video.
And J.D. Vance is such a perfect, like in cartoons, he's like the piece of shit sidekick who's going, yeah, boy, yeah, get him, Tommy, yeah, put him in a body. He's the put him in a body bag guy from Karate Kid, the original. That's what they all. There's nothing masculine about J.D. Vance. There's nothing. I don't have to tell you, but obviously when I speak in these terms, I'm trying to actually speak in the MAGA terminology to say if masculinity, if I won't do my very mediocre Scott Galloway impression about young men, but if we are concerned about young men, which I would still say the way we talk about our concern for young men sounds an awful lot like the way we have concern about not drawing pictures of Muhammad, where it's just don't do it because when we screw up women, they don't destroy society and go on mass murdering sprees. But young men, we've got to do better for them. Why? What happens if we don't do better for young men? They do drugs, they beat people, they kill people, they become a drain on society. To me, it's a very good proof of maybe that's why God or nature chose women to bear children and to perpetuate the species. Even though men are needed, there is something in this where you go, we've suppressed women for most of humankind, and we're still here and we're still advancing. But like one election where we decided that opioids and Trump losing and pronouns were like distressing and making men feel like unwanted and worthless, we're in a complete crisis of civilization. I think that speaks really to a core issue of the species and the two genders. But beyond that, I wanted to talk in the language of if masculinity is important, if being strong, if being a man in the traditional sense is what you actually care about, then why, like so many things that the Republican Party bastardizes, like Christianity, like democracy, why are the values of a traditional man? Take a Western. Why is keeping your word, sticking up for the little guy? Why are these not just as important as fucking women and lifting weights? Like, how are these things not equally important? Aren't those what make it caring for your family?
I would somehow caring for your family, showing up for your friends in their time of need, right, and defending them. We
always value that.
I always thought, like, growing up, a decent man kept his word on a deal. If you shook hands on a deal, you would keep your word. And there's so much of that gets just completely looked past. And I think that behavior gets more likely condoned now, that you can just rip people off and not give them what they paid for, which is what Donald Trump has been his entire life. He never keeps his word. So when they talk about the art of the deal and deal making, you can't make a deal with this guy because he cheats every time. And when someone always cheats, that would be the kind of man that you're referring to.
Right. My word is my bond used to be like, oh, wow, that's a man's man. That's a real man, a man. And now he took advantage of stupid people. That's being a man. That's like something to admire. And I'll give you a personal example. Like, this isn't what brought this about, but many years ago, a woman I had been dating, we broke up. 2 years later, we get back together. And I find out that when we broke up, she was very angry. I only find this out when we get back together. She's very angry. And she ended up having a long-term affair with one of my best friends who was married. And I was angry at her. I found that disgusting on her part. But what killed me, what broke my heart, was that the violation of, like, in my youth, I cheated on one or two girlfriends, and I'm not proud of that. But I would never, and I don't even mean to say this is a better virtue, but when you're talking about traditional male principles and values, there's not a woman on earth that my friend could be in a relationship with or care about that I would then, like, go behind their back or violate that because our bond, that is not something that, and I remember finding out that a friend did something to me that I could never do to a friend, and a male friend, was like much more devastating. And I feel like we now live in a society, the Trump male, the Tate male philosophy would be like, if you were a real man, you wouldn't have lost her to your friend, or
right.
Like she would have never done that because it's your weakness as a man. So then to validate my masculinity, I need to go, and instead of standing on my principles and being a good friend, I have to now violate other men, and they're not literally like prison, to prove that I'm a better man is actually to be like, I'm a shittier man who can subjugate and hurt other men, whether it's physically or emotionally. That is now the metric for manhood, whereas it used to be, do you treat people lesser? Are you a bully, or do you stand up for the little guy? Do you keep your word, or do you try to get over on people? Do you protect your family? Do you respect your neighbor, or do you get what's yours and bully? What he did to Zelensky, it's extorting your friends, basically. Like, what? It's just,
this is the second time.
Culture, they say, we had a deal. We have a partnership. This is not the work. This is not the work of a man who keeps his word. Like, criminals would have more honor than this.
The thing that people haven't pointed out, you just made me think of this when you said it's extortion of your friends. But this is the second time Donald Trump has extorted the same guy. In that Oval Office meeting, Zelensky tried to make the point to J.D. Vance that everybody else that pays close attention to this knows Vladimir Putin doesn't keep his deals. He's not a guy who keeps his word. And I just realized as you're saying this, Zelensky knows that about Trump, because Trump tried to extort him to investigate Joe Biden when Trump was president first time. That's why Trump doesn't like him. That's one of the reasons Trump doesn't like him. The other reason is he's very binary and he likes Putin in that relationship. Yeah. He's extorted the same guy twice, and you almost forget what Zelensky certainly hasn't. I can't believe I got to deal with this guy again.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate.
Not a man.
And if America were, to put it in blunt terms, a man, now the world, and I just read this in the Times, but it's like now the world has to really, it was David French's column today in the New York Times. Basically the idea of, the world can't trust the United States. It can't just say, oh, good, they have a Democrat again. You cannot trust the United States if our entire worldview and policy and treatment of friends hinges every 4 years. Right. And he brought up the Cold War. He said there were big differences in Democrats and Republicans during Reagan's time and the Cold War, but they all believed in NATO. They all believed Russia was a threat. They all like they all were on the same page on the big issues. And it was so, but now we have a president who is saying that the United States and its people, we did elect him, like we have culpability, is not to be trusted. It is not a reliable ally, because you make a trade deal. What if they bring in Trump Jr. in 2032 and he decides we're renegotiating because we can? Because we have the weapons,
it's true.
We have the money.
Every treaty that was by all countries, that's the way the entire world system had to work, is that if you signed a treaty, you had to abide by it. But the other thing is, I love that you say and that you talk to them the way that they need to learn. I don't like using the word bitch because it makes women seem less than, but I love the way that you used it because of the audience that you're talking to, who you wanted to resonate with in that video, calling them a little bitch and all of that. I posted the other day because I thought this was along the same lines of what your strategy was, at least, in appealing. If you care about masculinity, this traditional sense of it, and the toughness sense of it, of the three guys in that Oval Office, Who's the softest and who's the strongest? J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, or the guy who said when Russia attacked Ukraine in February 2022 and the U.S. government suggested that he take the U.S.'s offer to evacuate him from the Capitol. The guy who said, I need ammunition, not a ride. Yeah, he was a comedian. Then he became a wartime president of a country that was invaded by one of the most powerful countries in the world and said, I'm staying here. We're fighting. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance and Donald Trump have never been in a fist fight. And if they were, it was short.
But we are in a time now where every definition that we know is malleable to how it benefits Trump. Wearing makeup and being obese and wearing lifts in your shoes and assaulting women and lying and having no friends and being being a jerk is, if that's Trump, then that's our new definition of masculinity until he steps away. And it's very sad because Ukraine, it's like, of course Donald Trump said the dead soldiers are suckers and losers. It's one of those things where you go, of course he said that. I know it was just John Kelly, 4-star Marine general, who said it. What's his word worth? They're so far gone with this guy that he can, whatever he says, it's very emperor, it's very king, it's giving king in terms of he can just, whatever he says is the new rule. Whatever he embodies is the new definition of manhood or respect. And it's pathetic.
What would you say to the folks who I'm arguing with on Facebook in my town, which I really enjoy it. And I enjoy the perspective. I do enjoy putting up a post with making a few points, sometimes a little petty or pithy, and seeing their responses. And I never lower myself to name calling or insults until they start with me. And if they start with me, and often I'll still take the high road, but every once in a while I won't. But the bottom line is, what do you say to all of these folks who, when they hear me supporting our support for Ukraine, and a lot of Americans don't want to pay for Ukraine, never did, when they say, why don't you sign up? Why don't you go over there and fight if this matters? Because I've been telling them I'd rather send your tax money because I think it's far more efficient to bleed the Russian military dry without one American life. Seems like a pretty good deal to me. Plus, I have to stay here and fight you fascists. But is there a better response to that generally when they say these are the people that sent Americans to fight and die in Iraq and Afghanistan? I'm sure a lot of them are the same people if they were old enough to choose that fucking war and the support for that. What do you say to them when they say, why don't you sign up? You support the war. You support our I don't want to keep sending money to support their war in Russia. It's not my war. If you want it, you go sign up and serve yourself.
Obviously, the parallel, and people love the parallel would be like, why don't you mail them a check? It's not, why don't you go die? Because I'm not asking you to go die. I'm asking you to support our friend financially in the national and international interests of the United States.
Yeah.
But nobody's saying, hey, buddy, go die in Ukraine. Then the appropriate response is, no, you go. But when you're saying we should support an ally's war because it's in our long-term best interests, this is a classic sort of MAGA. You take a non-parallel argument, but you try to make it the same thing. Hey, we should support Ukraine. Why don't you go invade Russia and shoot Putin? What? Why is that the alternative to what I said?
I just wanted to send them a dime from every dollar that we make.
If you say no,
a penny.
Now the answer, to be fair, if they said, why don't you send a check for $2,000 and cover me if you're so good, sure. That's at least a response directly to what you're suggesting. But go fight is not. And I've heard that. They all get on the same two chats and get like the same 4 ideas to share.
Yes.
And I've gotten that a couple times. Would you go to Ukraine and fight? And I was like, no. Are you trying? And I just said to the person, do you think you made a point? Because it was just like, you think you got me. And you didn't.
The other bigger question, more important question, and I want your thoughts on it. You've seen all the best analysis out there from Ian Bremmer to, I don't know who you like.
Of the Eurasia Group, or as Fareed Zakaria says it, of the Eurasia Group.
Oh, well done. You've seen all the geopolitical experts or those who fashion themselves and often have been wrong about everything but still somehow get paid and sell books and give speeches. I like to remember the credibility of people. Your Richard Holbrooks and others. Not Richard Holbrooke. Who am I thinking of? Anyway. Your thoughts on the whole political alignment or realignment, the analysis of what we're seeing. Europe seems to be crying and cannot believe what has happened. And I mean, a lot of Americans seem to be shocked as well that the Republican Party, Senator Marco Rubio, a Cuban-American anti-communist war hawk against Russia his entire Senate career, has turned to the side of the Kremlin, so much so the Kremlin has put out a statement. The U.S. and the Kremlin are basically aligned. What do you make of this realignment? And we are not backing NATO and the West, but we are backing the former Soviet Union, Russia, and a murderous thug leader of a mafia state, Vladimir Putin.
It's just hard to, I don't know. I find it just hard to believe that obviously there was always a lot of false bravado in the Republican Party. They're the performative Christians, the performative patriots. But like, to me, my thought would be like, what if Marco Rubio just got up today and had a showdown with Trump in the Oval Office and said, this cannot stand or you'll have my resignation? Now, then what we would see is a tweet on Truth Social or a post on Truth Social saying, I have fired before he can resign. He would fire him via social media. Once again, you look a man in the eye. Oh, no, you do a social media post like Cowardly. A high schooler.
Cowardly.
Another example of his alpha male boldness. It's unbelievable. Like, if you did that in high school, they'd say, why didn't you say it to my face?
Right.
But I guess for the president, it's okay to be a cowardly high schooler.
Yeah,
not even a courageous high schooler.
Right. A guy who he appointed. He met his wife and kids probably at the ceremony. Everybody's the secretary. He's a cabinet secretary, and he fires him like a dog, like a cow.
But what if he just said, I'm going to resign over this? I think we would all applaud him. Sure. I think it would be the American thing to do. It'd be the sort of what you traditionally expect from this country. And I would just, like I said, I used to complain about Ted Cruz. I'd say, what are you in this for? You're a brilliant man. You can be a conservative. Why are you in this for your family to get insulted and get nothing out of it? With Rubio, I'd say, is this what you wanted when you were Secretary of State? You were a senator. You're like, what, the fourth most powerful person in our government? I think it's like after Speaker of the House, maybe. I forget what the exact, but he's one of the five most powerful people in our entire government. Is this what you got into it for? To be a bitch? To be a lapdog for Trump? You have no power. You have no position. You are an empty suit. Trump should be Secretary of State. Trump should be Secretary of State. He should be all of the cabinet positions because there's nobody pushing back in any way on anything.
Right.
What's the point? And half of them aren't experts in the field that they're running. So,
well, he is. It's not that far afield because he is appointed himself to be like the head of the Kennedy Center, right? He's basically taken over the things that he wants to take over or pay more attention to in his performative role as president. What are you paying most attention to, or just want to hear at the end, get your comments on any story that you're paying attention to from Doge and the government budget cuts, the victims of those budget cuts, how they're, by the way, being fired like dogs, because cruelty is the point. And not to mention just anything else that's happening. If you're following or reading about what's going on, the consequences, I just read in a piece of the New York Times, of the cutting of USAID are starting to come out. And just the simple idea, by the way, that, that people don't understand, MAGA doesn't understand, a lot of Americans don't understand why foreign aid is a good investment, or why having a lot of people, the IRS is a good investment, because you make $5 for every $1 you spend, they say. But in the case of USAID, when we prevent Ebola from spreading in a West African country, we prevent it from spreading here. In every single case of Ebola here in America, it's like $4 million to deal with because you got to lock shit down. That makes COVID look like a tiny little cough. It is horrific. And so the investment of stopping a terrible disease somewhere else is in America's vital primary national security interests, and very easy and very cheap, but they don't look at that. So I want to ask you about anything that you're paying attention, from Social Security, the threats around what's happening there, to the Medicaid cuts, to anything else here at the end.
I'll say two things before I give you my answer. Just on the same theme of the show, the idea of, they say Trump doesn't like soft power because he's a simple thinker. He's a short-term thinker. Hard power is quick. Soft power is culture and creating long-term benefits. So I get it. But once again,
or curing diseases and quelling violence.
No,
that
of course,
spread.
But I'm just saying the idea of what's so pathetic about Trump is he's also not for hard power. Hard power is standing up to Vladimir Putin, pulling out your nuclear missile and saying ours is bigger than yours. I'm not saying I'm for that, but if he were a tough guy, he wouldn't say, Ukraine, without us, you're done. He'd say, Putin, back the fuck up or you're done. That's, to be fair, what Reagan did. For lack of it, that is at least a form of diplomatic that is a relatable, tough guy, masculine approach. Not, hey, bitch, we'll kick your ass if you don't wise up.
Well, also, he's just to be clear, but you mentioned this, he's always siding with the victim. And that's not manly. Siding with the aggressor.
Siding with the aggressor.
Excuse me. Yes, yeah. He's always siding with the aggressor as opposed to sticking up for the victim or the small guy, which is what America has always supposedly.
He's not Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali. He's Don King. And I believe Adam Carolla said this, and it's a great line. He did say, Donald Trump, he said it as a joke after he'd been on The Apprentice, but he repeated it. He said, I've always said this about Trump. He's just like Don King, except with worse hair and no moral compass. When you know all you know about Don King, It's a pretty funny insult. Yeah. Because he was a horrible person. But what I would say is what I'm looking at, one thing is because I have a nephew who's in a special needs school. It's like a transitioning school for over 8 special needs people, is obviously Medicaid cuts will hurt places like that. And of course, once again, there's nothing stronger than taking money away from special needs kids and young adults. But one thing I have to say, and I know you've always been very supportive of veterans, and I get why that's always an easy issue and an easy rallying cry when veterans are being fired. But I'm almost tired of that as a line. First of all, it doesn't seem to work. It doesn't seem to work but what about the veterans? We have homeless veterans. Nobody differentiates. They're just like, the homeless are a problem. And nobody like, oh, but you're firing veterans. How can you fire veterans? At what point do we just say this is haphazard, cruel, and stupid, and they're firing Americans? They're firing people. They're firing people who do good jobs and work hard.
I disagree. I think it still matters. I think you focus on the government jobs that they like and support and think are constitutional, whatever argument they make, not to mention the, quote, heroes.
Yes, I get that why they do it. I'm not saying it's dumb. Yeah. I'm going under Trump – we have to realize it's people who care versus people who don't at this point. I know you have to be like, but veterans, hey, it's this black guy who didn't serve in a war. Fuck him, right? Who cares? But this guy's a veteran. And I get why you have to like play that game. But at some point, the fact that we can't just go, this guy is a chaos agent who doesn't care for America. He doesn't do the nitty gritty. He's not a hardworking person. There's no admirable or valuable quality to Donald Trump. It's people who are decent versus people who are not at this point, veteran or not veteran, because I'm sure there are plenty of veterans who love Trump. And while their service may be commendable, I don't really think they have the values that I cherish or think are worthwhile either.
I think when it's too simple to say decent versus not decent, because all these folks are decent people to their neighbors and their friends and their family. They show up for the people.
That's the J.D. Vance view of Christianity, which is Jesus was all about care for the sinner, love your enemy, take care of the stranger. And these people operate on a sort of false bastardization of Christianity. Like J.D. Vance said, you first take care of your family, then your community, and he said that not as an American, which he spoke that's why the Pope reprimanded him. He spoke like he had like that was a value based in faith, trying to reach these good American Christians who don't believe in Christianity. And so I'm oversimplifying it, but obviously I think this is where I vent and get very angry with where we are as a country. And I do oversimplify it because it feels simple.
No, it's not. It's not about. To me, it's more about in this conversation, and any is trying to understand because it helps me mentally to understand the incentives of people. Otherwise, it's so depressing and frustrating. So I really want to know, how can you be this way? And my general feeling is that you can feel much colder towards people who you don't know, who you generally don't know, who you generally don't care that much about, especially if they're foreigner, they're of a different religion, speak a different language, look different. It's just easier to not care about them unless one, and then you care about him or her and their family that you work with. That's the issue you see a lot of times with farmers and undocumented people, or more importantly, I've seen a lot in construction, developers and undocumented people. They love the men who work for them, who take risks, who show up and work hard and risk their family. They genuinely love them. So they're having a hard time being against them, but they still are in the end against immigration policies or whatever else, but not the ones that they know personally. And that's just how I see it. They don't care about people they don't know and can't relate to, as opposed to fighting for the people who aren't in the room. That idea.
Yeah, I did a show down south a couple of months ago, and the guy was very nice who booked me. And I remember him saying to me in the drive over, because this was a show in front of, when I say 100% MAGA crowd, 100% MAGA.
Just
like
now,
Southern.
This recent show you did down there?
No, this was a couple of months ago.
Oh, okay.
And guy booked me, and I did some stand-up, and then I was going to do Trump. And he's a really nice guy. We had a great conversation. And he even said to me, he said, I know your social media, and I know where your politics are. And he just said to me, he was like, I own a lot of businesses down here, and I'm in certain industries, and it just happens to be like Republican policies are usually much more favorable to my businesses. And I employ X number of people and this and that. And I said, okay. And he said, but I don't like, he said, I don't like the man. And this is a guy with several daughters, and one of his daughters is special needs. And I met her, and she was lovely. But to me, what I couldn't help but think is, you seem like a good guy. You've got friends on both parties. You're connected to a lot of different people. You understand the moral failings of the man, and you're able, I think some people, and this is like a test to me, I don't test people, but for this country, is how many of those people who are able to compartmentalize and rationalize, who understand, I'm not looking to talk right now to the people who say, Trump is he's the most patriotic, great American. I want my kids to be like him. I love the man. He loves this country. I can't talk, like, there's nothing for us to talk about. Like, you're in a different state of mind. But the people, which are probably in the millions, who say he's not a good person. I wouldn't want my kids modeling their behavior after him, but the policies benefit me. These are the people who I think need to experience somehow the pain. And I'm not talking like physical pain of somebody punching you in the face,
but the loss of your health insurance,
pain,
your job,
or your daughter, not a program that your daughter is in, maybe not having enough funding, or you got to shelter. Now you got to, instead of those tax savings, now you got to write a big check to meet the gap in funding for a child's program or something. And I hate that is what it requires, but that is the slice of America that needs to realize that if you keep compromising on your values, there comes a time where the bill comes due. And I think maybe even January 6th did not hit people. It was a Democratic history book tragedy. It wasn't a pocketbook tragedy. It wasn't a family tragedy, unless, of course, you literally lost a family member on January 6th. But until it hits those people, those are the people who need the wake-up call. They need to know that if you keep sacrificing values and principles, and you keep finding ways to rationalize empowering a man that you know is a terrible man, who is both not that competent and morally bankrupt, that there will be a price to pay for that capitulation.
Yeah.
And I think the first term did not give that to people.
Unless you count COVID, and didn't blame him, but yeah. That same guy probably lost money on his business during COVID, or maybe he got a loan, maybe he got made whole by the government, or a handout, if you will.
But those are the people who I don't wish ill on them. I wish whatever it takes for them to get right with the country, like to realize that values and principles, sometimes they're just theoretical things that don't get tested, and it doesn't matter. But for us to get over Trump and for us to realize what the hell we've done is such a catastrophic historical error in this country's history, there have to be consequences felt. And I think if Trump can run unabated for a little bit, I think those consequences will happen. And I don't wish anything bad on people, but for the sake of the country and where we're going, because we can't do a 60-year dance where, oh, Trump sucked. Gavin Newsom, please give us a charismatic, good president for 4 years, but we'll hate you by the end of 4 years. And then it'll be time for Don Jr. or J.D. Vance or Lara Trump or Marco Rubio or Doug Burgum. And then we'll keep doing this dance because it will never get bad enough that we'll have to be disavowed of these inane beliefs we have that are not good.
Those beliefs come from a place, though, and we can talk about that next time, but a lot of them are born on YouTube and podcasts and blogs and so on. And that's where a lot of these ideas generate from. Certainly with Elon Musk, and I know about the whole network state, the tech bros, the dark illumination, all of that. Those guys, they had an ideology, and that ideology was not very well spread across the world. It's crazy. Most of the ideas I still don't understand, but it's like a techno state, not a country, but the whole globe is one state. It's a techno state. And who's in charge? These billionaires, these ideas, these anti-democratic ideas, those started online. Those started on the dark web and shows and with ideas that most people didn't and still don't understand, but they've taken hold. So it's hard to stop those ideas that people believe in them and that would carry them out. J.D. Vance being number one, and Eric and Don Jr. buying into all that bullshit. It's like modern day Calvinism, but it's all tech.
But I still think, not to sound too biblical, but in terms of good and evil, but there are still people who are susceptible to that stuff and people who aren't. Sure. And I will say this, not to plug but I'm finishing up a blog this afternoon that'll be up like early evening. And it's just about my trip to Charlotte. But the most illuminating part of it for this conversation will be the second half when I discuss the very loquacious Carolina guy who was sitting near me who never stopped talking. But
I saw your posts about him, and I can't imagine it was real. I can't imagine it really happened.
It was real. But the journey of his life that I was forced to listen to, by the end of it, I just thought, you know what? I hate to admit it, but that might be – I'm not looking to reach – the aggressive, the Andrew Tate loving men of the world. But he sounded like a guy when I really listened. And I know this sounds like I'm running for something and I'm on the stump. Like we've got to listen to him. But being forced to listen to him just verbal diarrhea for 3 hours about his whole life and where he's been, I thought that is actually somebody reachable. That's somebody looking to be reached, I should say. Like he takes pride in not being set so firm and so on one side that maybe that's somebody who could be reached in terms of, if you have some time to listen, can I explain to you what? Now, the question is, and I actually thought about doing this, sorry to take up more time, but go ahead. Like I thought, wouldn't it be an interesting thing? And somebody had once approached me in 2020 about doing this and we'd ended up not doing it, but I may reach out to them again in terms of funding it. Like me as a comedian's mildly knowledgeable mediocre lawyer laying out like a political civics course, like a 10-episode video series of let me explain to you how these basic things in government work and then illustrate it through jokes and anecdotes about here's why what Trump is doing is not good on this level. Here's what Democrats or Republicans should be doing. And here's how this. But I thought to myself, this is a guy who he seems like he would be amenable to just sitting down for a beer or coffee and talking about things. How do you reach 10 million people at once in a way they want to, like in a way they want to be reached? I think
one way to reach 10 million people at once is having the vessel that this message that you think needs to be delivered the way that you think it would be effective would be having that vessel be Reacher himself. So many people are watching Amazon season 3 of Reacher, including me, that I'm forced to plug it and say that's the kind of person that needs to deliver the message on a platform like Amazon Prime.
You know what? If I want to do a parody series called Trumper, and it's like Trump doing all the things that like every time somebody's getting like a woman's being like domestically assaulted and he goes, not my problem, and runs away.
I will do that with you. I will help produce it, shoot it, edit it, act in it. Yes. Stephen Miller.
What is he like? What are some of his phrases? I haven't watched the new season yet, but that would be a funny, because I'm tall, so I could actually evoke the kind of bigness in the suit and the red tie.
Assumptions can get you killed. Details matter.
Assumptions kill. Details matter. I go, details are very boring, by the way, so please stop talking. Assumptions, I love assumptions because they're very quick. You just see something and you go, okay, done. Next question. Anybody have any pie? I'd like to please put some ice cream on it, though. Thank you.
Oh.
Like Trumper instead of Reacher.
I love it. Make it. I'll help. I'm gonna start a GoFundMe for this production. It's perfect. It's hilarious. And Reacher.
But that would be like one sketch. But I really do. I have started to think about how could I do what I do? Not make it a John Oliver half-hour thing, but like how in 6 minutes or something can I do a funny thing that isn't like the sort of standard late night show? Maybe it's just I talk more like I do with you and in my videos, but also making the point of this is how this is supposed to work, or this is why this happens, and this is why this is wrong. And maybe it's just educational. And I thought to myself, if I ever ran for any office at a federal level, maybe Mikey Sherrill runs for governor and I run an insurgent campaign for her House seat. But I just thought incorporating education into a stump speech. I don't mean just we need to do more for education. When you come to a 1 hour town hall, you're going to get a little bit of learning, a little bit of politics, little bit of rabble rousing, and some questions.
What I've always wanted to see, and I'm happy to see people like Michael Lewis has written about this in a book called, I think, The Fifth Risk, but his new book, it's just out, is Who is the Government? The Untold Story of Public Service.
How does this guy write so fast?
I think he might have some help. He does on this one. He's got a lot of people actually co-author it. But the point is, I've always thought that putting a face on government, it's very easy to dismiss the function of government or say it's corrupt or broken and all that. But I could see you taking any number of these stories of people who were former working in this agency yesterday and what their job was to point out how important the role of, I guess people can understand the importance of air traffic controller, but hey, we've been less sensitive to them in the past, so I don't know what it's going to take. But I could see you explaining the role of government, the function of government, specifically people working in government, much less just a civics lesson that was funny. That would be.
And you're going after the EPA next. I guess that's Doge's next target. And when you hear about somebody from DuPont Chemicals being put in charge of like regulating chemicals, that's the kind of thing that I feel like that needs to be made into a 2-minute video by the DNC of this is what happens when you don't regulate chemicals. Do you think, like you working person who's been told the EPA is raising your taxes and destroying, do you think just not regulating chemicals is smart? Do you think that's going to hurt you as a taxpayer and a citizen if we're just like very loose and that we put somebody who is in charge of a chemical business who's clearly going to go back to that business?
The easier example for every American to relate to would be an oil spill. And because that's a purview, obviously, of EPA and the federal government, we've all experienced more than a couple of them in most of our lives. But that's why I was shocked. I don't know if you saw this, but today, Lee Zeldin was the EPA administrator. He stepped down because Trump wanted to appoint to head the EPA an actual oil spill.
Oh, I always, if you were a quarterback, I would intercept so many of your jokes on defense because I'd be like, nope, stop backpedaling. That was not he is not making a serious news story. And pick 6. I got it. Took it to the house.
But you didn't. You caught me right at the end there. I usually go with bag of coal, so that was new. All right. Thank you very much. A lot of good stuff. Loved it. Appreciate you. Can't wait to be with you in Las Vegas.
Hell yeah. Yeah, this month. Awesome.
Right. There he goes. JL Cauvin. Come see us at PODJAM in Las Vegas. It's still on. The world hasn't ended yet. Get your tickets now. Thank you very much for listening today. I'll be back tomorrow with news and clips and great guests. And I can't thank you enough for being here and supporting me and the show. Go write a rating and review on Spotify and Apple. Subscribe on YouTube at Stand Up with Pete, and everything else is in the show links. And every day we've got vitamin N. So send your nature pictures my way. Thank you to everybody who does get outside, touch grass, be with friends, support important people and causes. It'll help lift you up. Go buy John Carroll's album. That will too. Right now, johncarroll.org. If you haven't gotten it, Go get it. Go send him $20 right now. It's so good. It's an old school. You can get the actual CD with the liner notes and all of it. I love it. Or you can just download it to stream. Either way, tell him I sent you. That's it. That's all. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Be the change you want to see. Stand up for what you believe in and spread as much love as you can.